Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today during what we know is a challenging time for all of us. I'm Beth Stroll with the Technical Assistance Network for Children's Behavioral Health, and I co-facilitate this System of Care Leadership Learning Community with my colleague and friend, Denise Solzbach. We'd like to welcome you to this month's session. It's great to see you all introducing yourselves in the chat box. Please feel free to continue doing that as we move forward. I would like to let you know that American Sign Language is available via webcam for today's session. To make the ASL interpreter's web camera your primary web camera, please hover over their web camera image and click on the pin icon, and then click on their name, Krista Lambert and Morgan Bell, and their web cameras will remain throughout the meeting. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we're now in a world where responding to COVID-19 is our top priority, and we recognize and appreciate that this is a difficult time for all of us in children's services across the country, and especially for the youth and families that we serve. Since you're all involved in responding in your states and communities, we at the TA Network wanted to make sure that we're supporting your efforts around COVID-19. So we created a series called Managing Now for a Better Tomorrow to accomplish this, and it focuses both on what we can do now and also on solutions as we move forward to the next phases. As part of this, we hosted a series of conversations for various groups, and that allowed interaction with both presenters and peers, and recordings of those are available on our website. You can see the list of recordings on this slide, and we also have resources that you can find on our website as well. An additional session, as you can see on the slide, is scheduled for Wednesday, August 5th at 3 p.m. That will focus on the 7 circles of wellness to reclaim Indigenous health and gain tools and, more importantly, strategies to live in better balance. To register, you can link in the chat box. And we have also been creating a method to work with you through Managing for a Better Tomorrow on working on lasting solutions to address social justice and race equity in order to build a better tomorrow for all children, youth, and young adults and their families. You can join us for the first event of that series, which will be on health disparities and educational inequities. It'll feature Dr. Nadine Finnegan-Carr. She authored Linking Health and Education for African-American Students, for African-American Student Success. And we encourage you to join us for that. As I mentioned, Denise Solzbach and I co-facilitate this learning community, the System of Care Leadership Learning Community. We've been holding it monthly, and it's designed to support leaders in systems of care. So that could be in states, communities, tribes, territories. And we have tried to address topics that would be helpful to you in these roles. We would like to be responsive to your needs. We've tried to do that over the years, and we have selected topics that many of you have recommended to us. We do like these sessions to be as interactive as possible, so we encourage you to put your comments in the chat box throughout the session. Ellen, our presenter today, whom I'll introduce in a few moments, we'll also be asking you to do that at various junctures throughout the webinar. We have incorporated some significant time for Q&A, and we'll facilitate that and do our best to address as many of the questions as you enter in the chat box as we can. At the end of the webinar, there will be a link in the chat box also for a very brief evaluation survey. And we would be very appreciative if you could take just a couple of minutes to complete that before logging out. And you'll also get a follow-up email that will provide you with the link to the recording of this webinar and also with the PowerPoint presentation. You may know that on September 7th, our contract, our federal contract to provide technical assistance ends. And today's webinar is actually the last that we'll be hosting in this capacity. Denise and I are so grateful for your participation in the events of this learning community and for the good feedback you've given us. We hope that it has been helpful to you in your work, and we do look forward to working with you in new ways in the future. We will still be here, even though our federal contract to provide technical assistance is ending. I'd also like to take a moment to mention our learning management system that's called Ideas at the Institute. This is a platform that allows our learning communities to be more user-friendly and more interactive. And through this digital hub, you can join learning communities, you can register for webinars, you can find recordings and resources of previous webinars, and the link to sign up for that is on this slide. This slide shows you what you will see when you log in and where you can find the TA network and information about all of the learning communities that we offer. There is a catalog, and you can see that on the slide. It will list all of the available resources that you can access. And after our federal contract ends on September 7th, all learning community participants who are enrolled in Ideas will be able to continue to access the content developed prior to September 7th by clicking My Courses on the main dashboard after logging in. But also, you can access previously recorded webinars and resources from our other learning communities, even if you're not enrolled in them. And you can find those through the links on the public dashboard and also through the clickable catalog that you can see on the web page. You don't need to set up a profile or be logged into Ideas to access the public dashboard, but access to new content that's developed after September 7th will require subscription, and we'll be sending details on how to subscribe to you through our TA Telegram. So today's session is the third of a three-part series on leadership in the time of COVID-19 and beyond. We created this series in response to the many challenges we heard from you, ranging from how to lead and support your teams and how you can take care of yourself in such a stressful context. The first one focused on adaptive leadership, the second on leading remote teams, and the links to the recordings of those are on this slide, and they're available if you couldn't participate in those. Today's session will concentrate on you personally as a leader and how you can maximize your effectiveness and increase your leadership energy in this context. We're very fortunate today to have an outstanding presenter, and she was the presenter for the entire series. It's Ellen Kagan. Ellen has been a pioneer on leadership and systems serving youth and their families. Many of you may be familiar with her work. She's the founder and co-director of the leadership program at Georgetown University Center for Child and Human Development, and led many of Georgetown's leadership academies, which are very well known and well regarded. And parenthetically, I had the pleasure of working with Ellen at Georgetown for many, many years, too many to mention probably. She's also the founding partner of the Coach Approach Partners and president of the Georgetown Leadership Associates. And I'd like to thank Ellen for her great work in putting this series together. We've had tremendous participation, and people have been giving us really terrific feedback about the series. The objectives of today's session will be on how to use personal leadership power to be effective in this time of COVID-19. Ellen will provide a framework for energy management. She'll talk about the domains of leadership energy and how to assess your own status in each of those domains. And probably most importantly, she'll provide a lot of strategies about how to actually increase your leadership energy in the middle of all this stress. So now I will turn this over to Ellen, who'll get us started. Ellen?
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for being such a an amazing colleague of mine for so many years. I'm so appreciative for the opportunity to speak to the field. And as you were all signing on, I just have this huge smile on my face. I recognize so many of the names from our experiences together at the Leadership Academy, at leadership trainings. Some of you are working with me now on the coach approach to adaptive leadership. And I feel like I'm in a room, if I could see all of your faces, where we're all sort of endeavoring in the same direction. This third in this series is, as Beth mentioned, really the opportunity to slow down for an hour and begin to focus on yourself as a leader, and to begin to sort of recognize that the opportunity to lead and to lead effectively rests within all of us and rests within the energy that we have inside of us and how we're able to manifest that in the world. I want to actually dedicate this webinar to the memory of Congressman John Lewis, who was a role model and mentor to me, who I met in the 1990s, and whose work has really inspired what I want to say is sort of the brand of leadership that you will hear me continuously sharing with our field, so that we can become even stronger together. John Lewis was born in 1940. He died last week in 2020. He was 80 years old and known as the conscience of the Congress. He had a quote that I've held close to my heart that I'd like to open this webinar around, and I want to read this to you if you'll allow me. And it goes like this, quote, "You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Study the path of others to make your way easier and more abundant. Lean towards the whispers of your own heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the incitement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, and know that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Choose confrontation wisely, but when it is your time, don't be afraid to stand up and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, you will shine like a beacon for all to see. Then the poetry of all the great dreamers and all the great philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, in a world, a community, a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself." Unquote. I share this with you today because to lead in the kind of world we're leading in is going to take each of us to the deep and to reflect on ourselves, to manifest all the gifts that we've been given, and to figure out, each of us uniquely and each of us differently, how we actually address the kinds of challenges that we're facing. Now, all of you who have heard me speak will know what I'm about to say, which is the world is going to do what the world is going to do. It is volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex, and it is ambiguous. And it is the antithesis, actually, of what is we're trying to manifest, because we want to see things that are more at peace and certain and clear and fair. And I think about this kind of world that we live in, and I think about our purpose. what led us to this moment that all of us are sitting, each of us in our own homes or our offices, me here in Annapolis, Maryland, and wondering how do we together really bring about the kind of world that John Lewis commanded us to do. I also want to share with you that because each of us brings our own gifts, we come with strengths and we come with liabilities and we come with things that we're really good at and we come with things that we're not so good at. And sometimes we have to be thinking about how do we use what we have to actually create that future. And that's what this webinar is all about. I have been practicing this. I didn't even realize it, but I've been practicing this all my life. For those of you who know me, and now for those of you who don't, I am a very small person. I am under 5 feet. I was always the last person on the line in elementary school and junior high school when they used to line you up by size. I was never the one picked for the basketball teams or for the sports league. And I actually began to wonder sort of like, what was I good for? Because in those days, size, athletic prowess were really the things that made a difference. And I realized at a very young age that I needed to cultivate other gifts that were inside of me so that I could live my purpose and I could be the best I could be. And so, I cultivated the power of language. I cultivated the power of using my energy to make myself feel bigger and do bigger. Back in the day before Zoom, and I used to do all my work on the phone, and when people would meet me in person, they would say, I didn't realize you were so small. And I would say, yes, not that being small isn't a good thing, but being big in ideas and big in presence is a way, perhaps for me, was a way I wanted to have impact in the world. Now, I share this with you because this was a choice. It was an area that I wanted to cultivate because I recognized that by making a choice, I might have more opportunity to bring about the world that I wanted. Now, there is a lot to be anxious about out there. And all you have to do is watch the news, listen to what's happening. The budget shortfalls in the future are going to impact all of us. The economic crisis, are we going to open schools? Spikes in cases, schools out and parents wondering, what am I going to do and how am I going to do my work? All of these are very, very real and very, very important. What I'm here to talk about today is that in this work that we do, we have the power to choose the kind of leadership energy we want to put out there, regardless of what's happening around us. Okay, regardless, it's going to happen. It's going to be there. We're going to talk about specific strategies. But the most important thing is to choose. I learned this actually from a colleague, Shannon Crossbear, who said to me once about a Cherokee story about there's good in the world and there's evil in the world. And it was told to me as a story from a grandfather and a grandson about two wolves that were fighting each other. And the grandson said to the grandfather, which wolf wins? Which one has the day? And the grandfather said, the one you pay attention to, the one you feed. And the message is, if we feed our energy, if we feed the positive things we want to bring into the world in all the different domains, we actually have the opportunity to make a difference. Now, the big theory behind this is that energy, our personal energy is renewable. It isn't limited like time. Time is limited, and we spend a lot of time talking about time management. And I'm here to say, let's talk about personal energy management so that we can create a renewable resource that can be replenished every day. Now, just to remind you, when I use the word leadership, we are talking about a verb, an action, a way of being, as opposed to a noun or a position, or a person. So all of us on this call, regardless of our station in the hierarchy, are leaders, and that's how I'm going to be thinking about you and addressing you. So leadership starts, if we're about to make a choice about how we're going to improve our energy, it starts with presence. And it starts with the ability to kind of clear our minds, to have intention and purposefulness in the world. So I love to show this slide because I think it is so emblematic of what is out there. We've got the guy on the left, and he's just humming along in his day, and his head is so full of so many different things, and he's not even really noticing what's going on around him. Versus the dog on the right. He has cleared his mind, and he actually can see the trees and can see the sun. And I say every morning, if I'm going to actually see the trees and the sun, I have to bring presence practices into my life so that my head is not completely cluttered with all the things that I know I have to do. And my practice every day is before I go into my mindfulness breathing exercise, which I do every single morning, I write a list of all the things I have to do, I put it aside, and then I can actually start my day with a clear mind. I'm going to encourage all of us to begin considering presence practices, and I'm going to really guess that the webinar coming up on wellness could potentially have some, and if they're not there, Beth, we're going to do another one in the future on presence practices. But I also want to remind you that in order to actually have awareness and we have presence, we need to really think of ourselves as having personal competence and social competence, because we don't do this work alone, but it does start with us. So if our mind is all cluttered, we can't have self-awareness. If our mind is cluttered, it's very hard to manage our emotions. So self-awareness, self-management, and on the right-hand side, social awareness, how we are relating and interrelating with other people, and relationship management. How do I engage? How do I improve my relationships? And we talked about this in the last 2 webinars. But what we didn't really talk about is power. And I want to spend a minute talking about power because this is really where John Lewis was such an influencer for me, and I want to share his wisdom with you. He shared that there's actually many different kinds of power that we have the opportunity to leverage. We have the power over, which is that moment to step into the void, or the moment where we need to supervise or delegate and not be afraid to step into that and to take the authority that we've been given through our position to mobilize others. Second, we have the power within, the power inside of us, that little voice that tells us that we can, when the big voice out here, which is the fear, tells us that we can't. It's the power within us that if we're quiet enough, we can hear, because it gnaws at us every night to step in, to do the thing we think we cannot do. We also have the power too, the power to create, the power to build a relationship, the power to attend something, the power to learn. We also have the power with others intentionally to create the future. Now, in adaptive work, we know that it's not about authority dictating the way to go. It really is about our social influence. And I want to offer this reflection to you about power with. A leader uses her own authority when necessary and social influence and shares power to mobilize and the collective intelligence, like the wisdom that exists in our teams, the wisdom that exists with our supervisors and our bosses, the wisdom that exists within the people with whom we mentor, the collective intelligence to achieve success so the organization can reset, meaning it can change and grow and flourish and thrive. But we also have the power within. And basically, to lead with this type of power, is without a title, that derives the power within the organization, not from your position, but from your competence, your effectiveness, your relationships, your excellence, your innovation, and ethics. And this is shared by Robin Sharma. Now, this idea about power is a really fantastic idea, because when I was growing up, or when I was at a different stage in my career, I always thought that I had to create another position. I had to move up the ladder to create power. But IMDO actually gave us a great definition. He's a child psychologist who shared this quote: "I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element for my team." That's a lot of power. I am the decisive element for my team. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. So how we show up matters. And he goes on to say, as a leader, I possess a tremendous power to make my team's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or I can heal. In all situations, it's my response that decides whether a crisis will escalate or de-escalate, and an employee feels humanized or dehumanized. So here you have this idea that the power to do this rests in your decision about how you're going to show up today and how you're going to show up for your team. And this power, which is inside each of us, what I'm hoping will happen in this moment will go from the unconscious to now the conscious, because you cannot change what you cannot see. And if you don't see these various different kinds of power within you, it's not possible to bring them forward in an intentional and purposeful way. So you may have seen this on the internet. This was sort of very popular, and I saw it several different places when COVID-19 first came out. And the question was that I love is, who do I want to be during COVID-19? Meaning, whoa, I have a choice. Like I have a choice of who I want to be in this space. Love that question. Super powerful leadership question. Super powerful coaching question. It's a question you might want to jot down and ask yourself every day. Who do you want to be? Who's going to show up? So you can see the way in which this schema shares with us is that there's this fear zone of who I want to be. I can grab food and toilet paper and live in this view of scarcity. I can spread emotions related to fear and anger and worry, and I can complain, and I could get mad, or I could forward a million messages to make sure like everybody's hearing what I'm hearing, and I'm like email overloaded. Okay, we saw a lot of this at the beginning of our relationship with this pandemic. It was a huge fear response. And then I want to say, for many of us, we began to choose. And we began to choose to live in what is called the learning zone. And we can recognize that we can start giving up control over what we don't have control over. And we can stop complaining because this is what we got. I can actually identify my emotions and name my emotions. I can become aware of the situation. And so I recognize that in trying to think about this, in this learning zone, we just start beginning to see that, in fact, we have a little bit of control in making a choice of how we want to be. And then, of course, the growth zone, which is where we all want to be, in growth and development and possibility. And you can see there, we begin to focus on others. We begin to use our talents for those in need. We begin to live in the present but focus on the future, like our leadership capacity begins to emerge with empathy and appreciation and happiness, and looking for ways to adapt to change with patience and a focus on relationships. And we talked about both of those in the first and the second webinar. So in thinking about this, I'm wondering if in the chat we can just go quickly to the keyboard, and if you could sort of do a reflection and see if this kind of mirrors kind of your own growth and development from the moment we were in shutdown and lockdown to where you might be now. And Denise, I saw you also had a question that you threw out as we were talking about this. So who do you want to be? So of the power domain, and this is a poll, which one resonates with you the most? Because I have to say, when we talk about power, people may sort of really resonate with one over the other. And I'm wondering, of the power domain, which one resonates with you the most? And we'll take a minute and a half for you to consider that. Power over for the people you supervise, power over to step into your own space, your own authority, power within, inside of you, power to create something, or power with others. And we'll take a moment to reflect on those. All right, Sarah, I assume you're watching the numbers coming in. Which one resonates with you the most? Today. Maybe say today. All right, let's see what we have. Okay, this is great. All right, so this is sort of interesting. So we have a whole bunch of people with power within and power with, right? So this sort of inclusivity, I think it's actually a hallmark of the system of care. People who gravitate into our field, because it is such an interconnected way of being, the with and within are strong. And then the power too is that activism, that sort of, that spark inside of us that says, I can actually create something, the power to do something. And I want to also say I'm very intrigued by the no answer. And it'd be really interesting in the chat if folks want to sort of say, I'm wondering if that's because there were so many different power domains that you were comfortable in, why that was really hard. But I also want to say to you the power over. I know it sounds, and maybe we can come up with better language. I want to really encourage you to think about the power you have with your team, because you are, many of you, in a hierarchy where you have supervisory responsibilities and the power to actually unleash those as you go. So now, fingers to the keyboard. Everybody, get ready. And in the chat box, I want to ask you this question. What's the one thing you can do in that power domain, whichever one you answered, that might make a difference in your leadership? So now I want you to turn the power domain into an action. What could you do within, say, the next week or the next period of time to actually activate that power domain? What could you do? What will you do? How will you think about that? And Denise, as people start writing, if you'll start sort of sharing what those are out loud.
They are moving quickly, Ellen. I can give more power to empower myself, actively listen to others. Self-care is a great one. Listen, power over my attitude and perspective,
Nice.
Again, listen intently. Mindful self-reflection harkens back to your opening slide. Very good. Positive self-talk. Sit back. Power within to plan ahead. Ask more questions.
Nice.
Encourage self-care again. Pause before react. Support and challenge. Encourage myself. Positivity in everything I do. Self-care, self-care. Honor myself. Create better space. We talked
Nice.
about that last meeting. Yep.
Yeah.
Smile and be thankful. That's
I see
pretty
that. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to smile and be thankful for all of you for putting these into the chat. Because again, the awareness of your power domain has to then translate into action. So it's awareness plus action that creates transformation. Awareness plus action creates transformation. And then we've got all this opportunity, and then we think about stress. So stress is, as we know, the ultimate energy zapper. And it can actually pull from us all of the key things that we want to do. So in leading others with energy awareness, I want us to put forward to you these 6 ideas as a reinforcement, and then we're going to get into some assessment of our own energy. We have to make sure we know what the key questions to ask ourselves every day. I'm going to remind you what those are in just a moment. We have to make sure that because we're leading adaptively, we're leading change, we have to leverage the collective intelligence. We have to bring people together. We have to create a space for the holding environment. I want to sort of offer to you the way in which we behave in that holding environment is the coach approach. I want to talk briefly about the impact of trauma, our own trauma, and really think about consistent and responsive leadership. So here we go. You may remember these from other webinars. I'm going to again sort of put them out there for you. Again, I'm a big believer in breaking habits and creating habits. And so I keep these questions up every day. I ask myself this question every day so that I know if I'm actually making a difference or not. So how can my team and I contribute to the COVID-19 response, or any response, that is really, really thinking about how to react to this VUCA world we live in? How can my team and I maintain focus on our overall strategic goals in the context of this crisis? Well, as a reminder from last webinar, we have to insist on strategic clarity. We have to know that our job as leaders is to facilitate focused action. And the third is we have to strengthen connection and alignment to make sure that we were stronger than we were before. The next question is, what's the potential hidden opportunity that this crisis is opening up for me? And what I want to share with you in all my executive leadership coaching, every single leader that I am working with has come to the same realization, that in this moment, we're pushing a little bit of pause. Like we're taking a bit of a whoa, what's happening here? But the question is, do we push pause like we do on a CD player and then push play and we're back at the same spot where we started? Or are we going to push play and it's going to be in a different space? Are we going to be reset when we move forward? And the leaders that I'm working with across the country and in leadership teams across the country and systems of care are all working hard to reset and create a different reality. Next, what's the hidden potential opportunity that's opening up for me? And what opportunity exists for strengthening my workforce and my community? You have this every single day instead of working off of a checkbox. Now, if we have these 4 questions and we are really clear that every day we can make a difference, even in the midst of this, unfathomable time, we want to remember that we use the collective intelligence to pull ourselves together. That's the key. Leaders, don't let any stragglers be out there because it's so easy to feel alone and like you don't belong. And our job is to bring alignment and commitment together. And you can do that with an email, with a phone call, with a text. And in this collective intelligence, we're going to learn new things. We're going to learn new things. And in this, we're going to actually have an opportunity to help people feel safe, even though we know the world out there is not particularly safe. But if we can build safe environments, if we can hold people through this crisis. Now here's kind of a universal truth, another one of John Lewis's gems to me years ago. He said, people will never forget how you made them feel when you were facing a crisis or when you were facing a loss. People will never forget how you made them feel when facing a loss. And so focusing on this holding environment, to remember that when people feel held, they feel stronger, they feel more powerful, they feel like they can do things. Now, sometimes we need to feel like we're being held, and I want to say, you know, this learning community is a space that we can all feel a little held by what's being provided for us as leaders to actually connect and be together. Now, in this holding environment, we also have to remember that we need to have a mindset and a set of skills that support the people that we're working with to keep our energy actually very, very high. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in the Coach Approach Partners to bring the coach approach to the system of care community. So what is the coach approach? Just in, you know, five easy steps. The coach approach, first and foremost, is a mindset. And it is an approach that says we believe that our teams, all the people out there in our universe, in our communities, regardless of station or position, are capable and competent, and that they're resourceful. We believe that there is often more than one right answer to the complexity that we're facing. We believe that when we ask questions, we support people's own critical thinking skills. And in doing so, they develop their own solutions. We believe that our role as leaders is to foster these skills, is to really help support exactly what's going on in their lives. And in doing so, in doing all of this, we will use the skill set of presence, engaged and active listening. So all of you fix-it mindset listeners, we're going to sort of learn to quiet that voice, that urge to solve the problem, but remember that our people are capable and competent. We're going to clarify and reflect, and we're going to make sure that people feel heard, like they heard us. That's why a venue like this is so hard for me. If I don't see you in the chat, I have no idea if I'm being heard or if I am having a relationship with you. And so when we reflect, when we respond, when we connect, I know that I'm in relationship to you, and that actually elevates my energy. We know that powerful questions are way better than quick answers. We want to really build this opportunity for people to learn to rethink, to think on their own. We also really provide supportive feedback, and I saw that in the chat. I saw that in the chat where people said, I'm going to share my gratitude, I'm going to share my appreciation, because that in and of itself lifts people's energy. I'm giving you clues now about all how we do this every single day, get that energy out there. And then lastly, when all that happens, people make commitments that they actually hold themselves accountable to. And when they do, people feel success, they adjust, and they make new commitments. And then the work goes forward. So the coach approach is actually something you'll perhaps hear more of in the future. And I really want to give a shout out to the half dozen states that we're working with, Pennsylvania being the inaugural state. And a big shout out to Lisa and Val and others who are becoming coach approach trainers so that we can have an opportunity to layer this approach across our system of care communities. But then we have, on top of this, a challenge around trauma. And I just want to make a note of it because I don't want any of us to feel like this is easy work. We know this to be true, that this secondary trauma that the employees feel can interfere with their ability to learn. It can interfere with our ability to learn. And as we think about this, we now know that there is a real neurological basis for this, that we have something called the frontal cortex, which is our kind of operating system, which kind of helps us do our problem solving. But when our emotions are triggered in a negative way, in something called our amygdala, which is actually our ancient brain, it shuts down our frontal cortex. And we're not able to think, we're not able to really process. People start forgetting things, they miss instructions. And then what happens is, when they're not successful, what do you think happens to their energy? It goes down. And what happens to your energy? It goes down. So being aware of past and current trauma and really building in like almost like the coach approach of attention to people and your presence and your positive, strong feedback will actually begin to rebuild that capacity to learn and that capacity to problem solve together. So here are a few of the ideas that I wanted to just quickly share with you about how we provide consistent and responsive leadership that begins to elevate the energy of all people, and then we'll look at ourselves. First of all, we're going to take responsibility to increase the level of support and encouragement, meaning we have the power to take responsibility to create this. And then we start practicing it. We observe each other's, and we watch for the response to change. And if we see people lagging, we intervene and we connect and we show compassion and we make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. We create this holding environment where people feel safe and seen and heard because we know in all of the crises that we're in, that loss is a part of what's happening. We're saying goodbye to rituals, traditions, patterns, habits that we had in the workplace, and loss is a part of that. I know in my experience also in system of care work, in working with professionals who have spent their life, their entire life, getting higher degrees and doing research and writing papers, having to kind of let go of their expertise even because it's more important to be listening to the stories of families, to be listening to the stories of our youth peers so that their wisdom can actually begin to be elevated and even match, right? This is a new paradigm for a field, and for all of us to be on the same playing field. And some professionals are feeling an incredible loss around that. We have to listen to staff with empathy about their emotions and not attend to them. And we can respond with presence to their cues, validate their experiences, and of course, increase conversations exponentially. So now let's go to our bucket, because you can't pour from an empty cup, meaning you can't do all of those things if you yourself are not in a good place. And here we have this idea of all of us carrying a backpack. And that backpack is loaded with our fears, with our histories, with our failures, with our we're not sure, with lack of communication. It's a heavy backpack, and the responsibility to help change our communities for the better. And there should be, an opportunity here to have a backpack that's upright. And so we're going to lead ourselves through this, because in order to do this for others, we have to do this for ourselves. So here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to attempt to do an experiential exercise with 400 plus people and me talking to a computer screen, and I'm going to ask each of you to have a piece of paper and something to write with. And draw a picture of a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Okay? Everybody doing that? And if you could put things in the chat, I'm going to start looking at the chat if I can. Okay. So everybody have a piece of paper and a pencil, and they're drawing a bucket. And you have a hole in your bucket. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to assume that energy is coming in and flowing out. And what I want you to do is I want you to draw a line across the bucket that identifies how full your bucket is. Your bucket is you. Are you overflowing? Are you half full? Are you more than half full? Are you less than half full? Are you very depleted? Right? That the work is so hard and the VUCA is so strong that it's hard for us. So how full is your bucket? Okay? So draw that line, and then we have a poll where we're going to be able to actually share with each other how full is your bucket. So Sarah, if you put up the poll. Okay. All right, how full is your bucket? It's a really good question to ask, you know, especially now with so much, as Beth mentioned at the opening, the social injustice, the racial disparities, which has been with us forever. Thankfully, it's getting visibility. So let's see what we have here. Wow, we have a couple people on empty, less than half full, about half full, a little more than half full, and 17 of you are overflowing. Okay, well, good. I want to hear more about that. I would say I'm more than half full. And wondering if you can then, now in the chat, reflect on what's draining your bucket. So for all of you B through E's, what's draining your bucket? And this could be very personal things. It could be global things that we're all experiencing, or it could be something very personal, like, you know, my children are not getting an education, or they're home and there's nothing to do. Great, love it. Okay, so a lot of these, I'm like watching really quickly. So a lot of them are in the universe domain, the environmental domain. I want you to think about very specifically as you go through this exercise, your personal, what is really bothering you about this. And by the way, what could be draining your bucket could be you need to clean out your files. It could be that your parents are ill and you can't see them. I mean, very specific things related to you. Great. So now I want to ask you, what's filling your bucket? What's filling your bucket? It really gave you like a deep insight into me. I told you I put on perfume every morning. Fills my bucket. Something about the smell. Beautiful. Right now, nothing. I saw that. Went by very quickly. We're going to rectify that in just a moment. Great. Okay. Morning, that's beautiful. Daily pool time, morning bike rides. Great. Great. You should all have, by the way, lots of little arrows about what's filling your bucket and what's emptying your bucket. So if you'll just take a moment as everyone is sort of sharing their things, put little arrows at the top of your bucket and just drop in all of the things that are filling your bucket at the top and all of the things that are draining your bucket at the bottom. Maybe not all, but a lot of them. Oh, love that. Coffee, filling your bucket. Beautiful. Some of life's little pleasures. Good. Art and family. Beautiful. Devotion, Sunday church. Yoga. Beautiful. Okay. So now we have a bucket and we have an understanding about what is filling our bucket and what might be coming out of our bucket. Yeah, baseball is coming back. Let's hope that continues. So here we go. So now we have to think about energy. And this is where we started, and this is where we're going to stay until the very end of our conversation. Understanding energy management, and that there are actually 4 different kinds of energy that we can tap into. We're going to look at the current state of our energy using our bucket as the metaphor and try to figure out how we can make things better. So let's talk for a second. High school physics definition of energy is the capacity to do work. It's also the strength and vitality required for sustained physical and mental activity. So I'm going to guess, just looking at the chat, that most of us are being called upon to have sustained more mental energy perhaps than physical activity, but physical energy will sustain us as well. And energy is also, another definition, is your personal power source as a leader. And so here are the 4 dimensions of energy, and I really encourage us to be thinking about this in its fullest array. We've got our physical domain, which is about sleep and nutrition and exercise and health and kind of physical well-being. We've got our emotional side, which is about happiness or about feelings, both positive and negative. We have our mental energy, which is our ability to focus our attention on things. And we have our spiritual energy, which is about purpose and meaning and making sure that we understand that for ourselves. Okay, 4 different domains. We're going to take a look at our buckets in a minute and see if we actually have identified or addressed all 4 of those domains. So it's important to understand a couple of things. First of all, for each of us, how it affects our energies, and that whether we have a deficit in one area and a surplus in another affects each and every one of our domains, meaning we are a system and we are very interconnected. And as you get into energy learning, you can understand that increasing something in one can actually impact and influence another. It's not static. It's going to change over time, which is, thank God that happens. And it's different in crisis than it is in normal times. So depending upon where you are in that fear, learning, growth stage, your energy will need to be modulated. And it's okay to be where you are right now. Okay, so I just want to put that out for you. It's sort of the interest or the desire to increase. But here's the thing, and I said this at the very, very beginning, it can be managed. It is a renewable resource. It can be replenished. And what's exciting about that is I always used to focus myself, if I wanted to be productive, I used to focus on time management. And then I shifted to think about how it impacted me in my energy. So let's just do another little quick self-assessment. This won't be a poll, but I want you to sort of, in terms of your physical energy, give yourself a rating, on where you are. You can share it in the chat if you want, but sort of like if you assess it. And we're assessing it right now, you know, sort of in this day space. We're in this little small time frame, right? So we've got all sorts of things. I see a lot of things in the middle. And I love that people are putting 7s. So if you're in that domain, we want to learn from you. I can't say that this is something I am really good at, but we're going to continue to learn together. Okay. This is what we call, by the way, an energy audit. So you're sort of like checking in with yourself and seeing like how you're doing. So here are some examples of how we renew our physical energy. And I would love in the chat for you not only to share where you are in your own assessment of your self-awareness, but other things that you do as well. Okay, number 1, set routine sleep habits. In every study I have read, every single one of them, sleep is the number 1 thing that's going to impact our emotional and mental and spiritual state. It has been studied that a routine bedtime and a routine wake time is the number 1 thing that can help us. And they're suggesting earlier bedtimes and reducing alcohol use at night. Alcohol use at night actually may cause us to fall asleep faster, but interrupts our REM cycle. And so what we're looking for is for all those REM cycles to connect to each other so that we can have a longer night's sleep. Think of yourself like an infant. Remember when, you don't remember when you were an infant, but if you had an infant, you remember they were up every short period of time. Well, babies learn how to link their REM cycles. So as adults, if we're using alcohol at night, we're breaking that REM cycle. So something to be aware of. Eat small meals and light snacks every 3 hours. Another now evidence-based practice that's coming out from the field of nutrition. Go for a run. Take a 20-minute nap. This is the REM cycle for most of us. They're in 20-minute cycles. Stand up and stretch every 20 minutes, which we're not doing right now. So I take that. Take brief but regular breaks at 90 and 120 minutes throughout the day. And learn to notice imminent signs of fatigue, such as yawning or hunger or difficulty concentrating. Because the idea here is don't let these things like get really embedded in us, but take that moment and shift. So it's like, have you heard that people say as soon as your headache comes on, take that aspirin? Because the longer you wait, the harder the aspirin has to work. So these are some examples that come from the literature. So I'm wondering if anybody else has other things to offer. And Denise, let's see if we can pull some of these out of the chat.
So we have Jane saying, does walk work as well as running? I said, absolutely. Some of us aren't coordinated enough to run. Sticking and going to bed at a normal time and not changing morning routine. Again, walks work for somebody else. Sleep is a serious issue for several folks. Amy sees a chiropractor weekly. That's wonderful, Amy. Relaxation to relieve stress, spin classes, limit screen time at bedtime, audiobooks. We also had Deborah and Jessica comment about, since working from home, there's a poor work-life balance. We talked about a lot about that in our last discussion. Nikki likes to paint. Christopher lifts weights. Intermittent fasting. Interesting, Megan.
Great. Great. So keep this coming because this is the chat becomes a part of the output of our conversation. So what I'm sharing with you here is just some of the literature, and this is now from people's experiences. Beautiful. All right, let's move over to the emotional energy domain. Now, emotional energy is this focus. It's the ability to manage our emotions or our feelings around the day, how well we are able to do that. So I'm wondering if people then can see for yourself how you're able to focus your emotions and your feelings. And to assess, where are you from a 1 to a 5? Yeah, this has to do also with the quality of your energy, the quality of your feelings. The emotional domain really, really is the domain when someone says, well, how was your day? And you respond, it's coming from that emotional energy space, more likely. And so what does the literature, have to say about the emotional energy in leadership? And again, this is really where things like the coach approach, which is so relationally based, and for many of you who said the power with other people, that we have to find ways to increase our connections or create connections with other people. So for all you extroverts out there, be very mindful that the best and fastest way to increase your energy is get into a conversation. You may not feel like it on the outset, but chances are good when you're in it, it will increase. Now, interesting, someone said in the physical domain, unplug from your news cycle and the Twitter feed. There is nothing that brings that emotional energy down than watching the news these days. And I'm waiting for some brilliant person out there to actually have a sort of a happy news channel that we can all plug into and just get our daily dose of really positive things that are happening out there. I would encourage like the System of Care TV channel, I think that was out there for a while, could be one of those. We can express gratitude and appreciation. And I want to actually say the research on this is now unbelievably crystal clear. Once we start showing appreciation and feeling gratitude for the moment that we live in, for the things that we do have instead of the things that we don't have, our emotional energy increases and diffuses those negative emotions. It's sort of like a negative emotion zapper out there. The other thing is that negative emotions in normal professional and community work actually is temporary for most of us. And that one of the things that helps is to understand I'm in this sort of cycle and this negative emotion, I'm going to just ride the wave. And so there's a whole new body of literature out there around these 60 and 90-second cycles of negative energy, and then we know that they're going to subside. And then, of course, the last one, which is my favorite, and I do another shout out to my Coach Approach colleagues out there, is that breathing. We have access to breathing 24 hours a day. And we will find that inside of the breath is the opportunity to change our entire emotional state at any moment. Leaders who can manage their nervous systems are more effective. Leaders who manage their nervous systems are more effective. And to manage our nervous systems, God gave us breath to actually do that. And so we bring in oxygen into a very, very powerful state. We hold it for maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 counts, and then a really nice, powerful exhale. The exhale is where the energy actually has been space inside of you to come back in through your breath. It is amazing if you think about it. I want you to watch this for the next week, anyone on the call, how often we realize our breath is either so shallow, we're not paying attention to it, and sometimes we even stop breathing, and we're not even aware of it. So bringing that breath back in, you can start your day with a breath as well. 7 counts in, pause for 3, and then 7 counts out. Okay. By the way, that CO2 that we expel actually feeds the flowers and the trees, so they need us to feed them. Okay, now let's get to the mental. This is really powerful because, boy, how many of you are spending just hours on Zoom, right? Okay, here we go. In terms of your mental energy, where's your energy management around that? 4, 2, 3, I know. This one's really, it's really gotten harder with Zoom. Yeah. I see some 4s. That's really good. That's really good. Awesome. All right, so let's see what the literature has to say about our mental energy. And these, again, are evidence-based practices, and some of them are really, really excellent. So mental energy has everything to do with focus. Focus. Remember I said a leader's job is to focus on facilitated action. A leader's job is to focus on strategic clarity. A leader's job is to focus on commitment and alignment. And if we don't have that focus, we are working at half-mast. So the idea here is, first of all, take a break and shift the part of the brain you're using. So, you know, just like you're reading, shift to writing. If you're writing, shift to reading. If you're reading, shift to speaking. Listen to and use your different senses. The second thing is to reduce interruptions, including email, text, etc. This is an energy drainer, an energy drainer. I mean, one of the things I've heard from system of care leaders across the country is we're learning to be better at using our away messages. So for example, even if you're on an hour-and-a-half webinar, if you put your away message on, people are not expecting to hear from you, and you can be here now. You can be present in this moment. So put your away message on. Watch a humorous YouTube video, which is another sort of shift in the part of your brain. Increase your observation of self. Are my thoughts useful, and how are they behaving? Like, are they jumping around? How can I quiet down? So even bringing in awareness. Put your focus on serving others. Put your focus on serving others. This is just like the emotional energy around showing gratitude and appreciation of others, and live your core values. I want to say a minute about this. Not a lot of research, but this is anecdotal from my experience working with so many of you out there. When we are not aligned with our values, our mental energy goes down. So if I want to be a compassionate, kind person, and I find myself doing things that are not compassionate and kind, I'm at odds with myself. I am not aligned, and my mental energy goes down. If I am a person who believes in bringing the collective intelligence together and doing a lot more asking, and I find myself telling, my mental energy goes down. So the idea here is to be clear of what your core values are and live with intention through them. And so it's really, really interesting here. Put your focus on serving others. Use all your senses, as I said. I'm going to add one here that just happened to me recently, which is make sure you get an eye exam, because from looking at all this Zoom stuff, our eyes may be changing, and that might be impacting our mental energy. So let's see about before we move to spiritual, let's stay with the mental, and I just wanted to see if there are others who are out there who have tips and clues for us about how to increase our mental energy. Okay. And Denise, I'm not sure, I am not seeing the chat, so I wanted to see if there's anything that we want to share.
We have some meditation, setting task timers, setting weekly priority focus, prayer, exercise, circling around. The kids need a break just as much as we do, watching cartoons, listening to calming music, singing a happy song.
Great. So I want you to remember that mental energy is around focus, and everybody needs different things to focus. And now we're going to move to the last domain, which is spiritual energy. So spiritual energy is really about your meaning and your purpose in the world. And I'm wondering where people feel in terms of that sense of energy, that you wake up every day and you feel your purpose, or is it possibly the energy management in this area is lower? So take a moment to assess that. You can share it if you'd like, just so we can see. Okay, great. I'm really appreciating all the 4s, and even 3s are really great numbers. I mean, great in terms of being able to hook into that part of our energy, even in this really challenging time. And so here we go, because this is where our great faith traditions, whatever they are for you, were built for this purpose, for us to reconnect in that kind of way with something that's larger than ourselves. We could find a sanctuary, a physical place or space, and it could be a physical space or a space in time. So some people like to go to some place, and some people like to create sacred time with their family, or sacred time for themselves, space or time. People meditate in this space to renew our spiritual energy. We make sure that we spend time developing our purpose, and we make sure that we're living on purpose every day, and reminding ourselves why we're here. Big question, why we're here. And then, as I said earlier, in the living your core values is really identifying what they are and making sure that your human spirit is really aligned with your core values. And again, I invite all of you to put into the chat where your spiritual domain might be. So the last and final things I want to sort of share with you in the remaining few minutes I have is to choose where your energy goes, and to really be intentional about this, that we have control. And when our energy is depleted, I want you to think about all these different strategies, like interventions, like something that can come into our lives by choice and actually renew where we are in any given moment. And athletes know this. They need rest and recovery before they go back out onto the field to do the hard work. And that system of care work is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And these actual strategies are infinite. And our renewal is infinite and as unique as you are. So based on the 4 energy quadrants, take a look at your bucket and see what's missing, either from the top or the bottom. Did you identify things that are flowing in from the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual coming into your bucket? And did you notice that there might be things that are coming out of your bucket that are also in those 4 domains? And add to your picture. Looking at your bucket, add the things at the top that are filling your bucket, and add to the things at the bottom that are draining your bucket. And as you pick, here's my last poll question for you. Which form of energy has been most depleted in you by this crisis?
So again, this is part of a
Alan, as the responses are coming in, we do have 7 minutes left for our discussion today, and I do have one question for you when we get to the end so far. So if others have questions, please put them in the chat box.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for that gentle reminder. Great. Well, I think let's close the poll since we're short on time. Let's see what we have. Okay, that's really interesting. So we've got sort of mental and emotional energy are being depleted the most, with spiritual energy being the least. Beautiful. And so these are reflection questions as we kind of leave this conversation. You actually have different kinds of energy, different spaces, and here's the reflection question for all of us. Another one of those questions to ask yourself every day. What difference would it make to the quality of your leadership if this form of energy were removed? What could be accomplished if you actually increase this form of energy and don't give it away because of circumstances? And if you think about one specific easy thing you could do every day to help you renew the form of energy that you said was the one that was the most depleted, what would you do? What could you do? How could you improve the quality of your leadership by adding one action every day that would increase the domain of energy that is the most depleted in you? So let's just take a couple and see what people are thinking. Fingers to the keyboard in the chat. Because it's awareness plus action. So the awareness is there. The form of energy has been identified. What could you do every day that could be a reminder to increase your energy in that domain?
So we have be more present, walk, breathe, identify priorities and set boundaries to protect them, focus on gratitude, deep breathing, take more breaks, eat at least one vegetable per day and walk. I like that.
Oh.
Take breaks.
Love that.
Frequent breaks from the computer. Yeah, let's take breaks to eat. That's great.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I love someone who said we're going to actually decide the end of the day. like the day really does end at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, right? We do really do that shift. Good.
This is a good, Christopher, accepting the fact that even though my role has changed with my client, it does not mean that the service and support I am providing has changed.
Oh, nice. I love that people are saying they're going to breathe.
Calming music. Watch less world news.
Beautiful. I'm with you.
Connect with positive people and smile as much as I can.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great. So I'm leaving you with some reflective questions post the webinar, just some reflective things to say. What was it like to talk about my energy? That we can all be in renewal. And I'll leave you with this quote. To be a good leader, you need to take care of yourself in your 4 energy domains, so you will have the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual energy to take care of your people. And I want to remind you about a fortune cookie that Val Olds got the other day, which said the only thing that limits the possibilities in your life tomorrow are the buts you use today. So until we meet again, your energy is valuable. We need you. I'm honored to be a part of your journey. Your energy is needed and valuable. Distribute it wisely, onward and upward, and I'll see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. I do have one question. Roxanne asked, and this was while we were talking about emotional energy, she asked about, and it was specifically riding the wave of emotions. She wanted to know if you have any research links on the 60 to 90 cycle of emotions.
You know what, Rox, I do, but I don't know the citation offhand. How could I get that to you, Denise?
You could send it to me, and we can make sure it's in the follow-up that we send out to everyone. That would be great.
That's great. So these are the waves of emotions that come out, and I will.
Right. Just the research on those waves. Yep. Yeah. The 60 to 90 cycles of emotions.
Yeah. The only one that wasn't some sort of citation, or I found it in the literature, was get an eye exam. Yeah. That was an Ellen observation.
Right.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all again. I saw that there were great suggestions and things that people are going to do in the chat, and we can use that as now a resource for the entire network.
That's great. Thank you, Ellen. And Beth, I don't know if Beth was having trouble. There's a storm in Virginia. I don't know if she's able to join us by video at the end here. We want to thank all of you. Ellen, thank you again for all parts of the series. It's been a great discussion. Sarah Warner, we don't know how we would stay connected to WebEx without you. Want to thank both Morgan and Krista for our interpretation. ASL, we love having you with us. And Michelle Boardman, thank you for joining us in the chat. Beth, it's been 5 years.
Yes, it has. And of course, I want to thank you, Denise, for being an amazing partner.
Likewise.
And for all of you who participated in this. Many of you have been part of our other sessions over the years. As I said at the outset, we're very grateful for that. And we will still be around, and we are creating other opportunities to do things to support your work.
So thank you, everyone. Please do stick around and participate in the evaluation link that I believe Sarah can pop up in the chat box. There it is. Thank you, Sarah Warner, once again. Please stay in touch. If you have questions about how to continue to work with the TA Network, please shoot us an email. Thanks again, Ellen. And Beth, thank you so much. Yep.